2.
Hello, everybody. I'm Marion Hammond. I'm the Education Coordinator for Autism for Children's Mercy, and I am personally super excited to be a part of this because I also need to hear it as a parent that's already made a lot of plans, but knowing that I also need to make more, my husband and I need to make more. So we are going to start. I'm just going to give you a little bit of housekeeping up front, and then I will introduce our speaker that we have that I'm super excited about. So the housekeeping is any questions that you have through the presentation, please put them in the Q&A. And if you don't see them, we have to publish them. So I will be doing that. But go ahead as you think of something that's, because Casey's going to talk about a lot of things, go ahead and put the questions in the Q&A. And she'll talk about if we don't get to every single one, what you need to do, but go ahead and do that. And the second thing is, please, if you haven't already, sign up for our Autism Clinic newsletter. There's the link you can see on the screen or the QR code. It's free. It just keeps you informed of the different trainings that we have and a few different things going on in the community. And so it's really the best way to keep up. So if you haven't done it, it literally is 3 lines. It will take you less than 30 seconds to sign up. And just a little other extra thing, if you do sign up for a training, it's really nice if you actually do attend, because it helps justify us continuing to do this in the future. So we know what your lives are like, trust me, but we do really like you attending. So please, I'm preaching to the choir right now if you're listening to this, but I'm just putting that out there. So those 3 things. And then I wanted to tell you about one more opportunity that's coming up. And that is it's a special holiday opportunity. If you've ever seen or ever heard about the Nutcracker Ballet, it is a stunning Christmas ballet, and it's done by the Kansas City Ballet and at the Kaufman Foundation, the Kaufman Center. Sorry, I was at the Kaufman Foundation all day today, so that's on my brain. But it's such a special show, and a few years ago, before COVID, I was on a committee that worked with the ballet on bringing this sensory-friendly version of it. And so we do that. There's actually a permanent sensory room at the Kaufman Center, which is really cool. But we set up ones there at the time, and I give a little training to the ushers for the evening, and it's just an unbelievable. I took my daughter for the first time, and I'm a person that has been involved in the arts all of my young life, spent thousands of hours on the stage. And so it was, but theater has so many unwritten rules that are impossible for our kids. And it can be embarrassing if you do the wrong things at the wrong time. And what's so cool about this Nutcracker is that everything goes, and they're asking, the tickets are only $25, which is remarkable. They dim the house lights just to half. The orchestra, Kansas City Orchestra, that's part of they maybe play a little softer than they typically do. I mean, they've made all kinds of concessions for this performance, which I was on a meeting with them the other day, which they told me it costs $50,000 to put on this performance, and they're charging $25 for tickets. What I'm amazed about is Kaylee was mesmerized. I mean, she doesn't attend. She doesn't like to watch TV, really. She just likes to be with people, but she did not take her eye off the stage. And my typical daughter was with me, and she was just like, Mom, I can't believe this. I'm like, I can't believe it. Now, a young guy kicked my chair through the whole thing, but I thought, who better than me to have somebody, so, we don't stop things like that. That's A-okay. If that's what that kiddo needed to do to get through the performance, we were good. So it's, there's kids sometimes up in the aisle. It's just, it's acceptable for everybody to go. So I would just say, if you get a chance, please try and attend. It's just the one performance on Wednesday, December 13th at 6 p.m. You will not be disappointed. It's very, very special. So that's that. And I just want to introduce, well, I think that's my last slide. Yeah. So I just want to introduce my friend Casey. I'm reading this off because I love what her intro was. So as a fellow special needs parent, Casey Seitz knows the importance of crafting a whole story plan that considers the complexity of each family's unique situation. In 2013, she created her financial planning practice, Whole Story Planning, devoted to helping special needs families like hers. In short, in this short workshop, Casey guides parents, guardians, and family members like you to better understand the planning your children may need in each stage of life. And I am so happy to turn you over to my friend Casey Seitz.
Hi, everyone. It's so good to be with you. Thank you, Marianne. It's always a pleasure. We volunteer a lot together at Children's Mercy, and I'm grateful for your friendship and also just being another special needs parent, right? And troubleshooting some things with our kids sometimes that we have to do that. We're going to talk today about how to create a life plan for your child, and it's a big topic, right? So there are going to be some things that we go through that if you do have questions, please enter those into the Q&A box, and Marianne's going to be managing that for me. I can't see those, so I hope we can get through those. If you have questions that maybe you're watching this recording later or you want to reach out, we will give you the ability to contact us, and we'll get everything hopefully answered in our time together today and or at a later date. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about us as caregivers. I think it's really important to understand some perspective, right, on this topic. All of us that are here and listening to this are facing this challenge, which is, what does this look like in the future? So there was an independent study done a few years ago, and I think it's really interesting in terms of the data that they collected from families. 82% of us as caregivers are concerned that we do not have enough financial resources to last our child's lifetime. There's a lot of us who are concerned that we won't be able to retire. And if we do retire, we're going to have to somehow compromise our retirement plans in order to specifically provide for a long-term dependent. 60% of us who have life insurance have less than $300,000 of coverage, and fewer than that have the protection of what we call permanent life insurance or whole life coverage. And the lifetime cost of caring for a dependent with autism is between $1.4 and $2.4 million. And yes, that is out of pocket. That is after insurance. So this is a big deal. This is something that almost all of us here are thinking about and sort of at the back of our minds, right? How do we do this? How do we put this all together? 73% of us don't have a long-term care plan. So for example, when we need care, when we're older, what does that look like, both financially and also from a caregiving aspect? 87% of us are concerned about what will happen to our child when we can't do the direct caregiving any longer. I pause here because this was my North Star. This was the reason why I started asking more questions, wanting to learn more, getting more educated when my daughter was younger, because this scared me to no end. This was my biggest fear. So if this is yours, you're not alone. You have a lot of people who are also worried about this and facing this concern. Okay. 59% of families have not written a will addressing the special needs of their relative. 67% of parents have not created a special needs trust. You're going to learn a little bit about what that is tonight and what that looks like. 23% of families that have a formal financial plan for their dependent. However, only about 37% of those are working with a financial advisor. So I say all that because those are some big statistics. And the reason I created a lot of the educational workshops that I do on a regular basis with organizations like this one and others in the community is to try and reduce these statistics, right? How do we start to pull together all of this siloed information so that we as parents can be educated, but also we know where to go and where to look to get answers to our questions. Okay, so hopefully I'm going to give you some valuable information that you can use to ease a lot of these fears for you and your family. This is my family. I always like to introduce who we are. My name, like I said, is Casey Seitz. This is my husband, Dan. We live here in Kansas City, and we're actually on the Kansas side, so we live in Shawnee. We've been married about 16 years, and we have 2 kids. Our daughter, who you see here in the wheelchair, is 13, and she's a brand new teenager as of last month, which I'm still trying to get used to. But she had a brain injury at birth that caused a lot of her medical complexity, and that was due to a placental abruption that was very unexpected late in labor. So she's got cerebral palsy, cortical visual impairment. We deal with seizures. She is G-tube dependent, nonverbal, non-mobile. Although I will say the nonverbal thing is becoming less in my mind of a descriptor because she has an eye gaze device and she is actually communicating a lot with that device now. Nobody really warned me about how sassy a 13-year-old girl can be, but especially to her mother, but I'm learning that that is the case. So she's awesome though. She is very responsive in terms of questions sometimes that we'll ask her or things that we've learned about her over time. And so I don't always like describing her by her diagnoses because she really loves stories. Her favorite color is purple. So if there are any K-State Wildcats fans, you're in good company in our family. She's all about them, I think, because they're purple and white. She loves music. I am also a big fan of the ballet, like Marianne was talking about earlier, so I will often take her to the Kaufman to listen to the music and watch the performers. But Enrique Iglesias is her favorite. Anytime we play his music, she's very into that. And then, like a lot of other girls, she's a girly girl. She loves anything that sparkles, bows in her hair, makeup, you know, nails done. This is Hudson. She's very much into that. Our son, who you also see here in the photo, is just about to turn 11 years old, and he was diagnosed at Children's Mercy a couple years ago with level 1 autism and moderate ADHD. So both of my kids are affected in some way in terms of some of their development over time. And although, you know, Hudson is most likely going to be our full-time long-term dependent, I really think, you know, Dominic is going to be a very good adult, but getting him there is our challenge, right? How do we make sure that he has all the developmental supports and therapy he needs to live his full life too? So he's into Roblox, Formula One racing. Red Bull is his team. He and his dad watch Formula One a lot. And then, like a very proud financial planner and mother, he loves computers and math. So I think that's a very good career path for the future, right? Okay, professionally, I have been in financial services for 15, 16 years now. I've had my practice for 10 years. We have a team here locally in Kansas City that serves all of the 400 to 500 families that we work with in 30 plus states. So I work nationally. My practice is solely focused on special needs planning. That's all we do all day, every day. We don't have generally clients that are outside of that. And this is my team. Ashley, who you see here, is actually my younger sister. She's my operations manager. Jason and Anthony both are heavily involved in the world of disability supports. Anthony's sister actually has autism, and you know, he came into this with me to help do the financial planning side of things. And Jason does a ton of volunteering and always has. So we're really proud of our team. We're extremely active in the community and try to constantly stay up to date on a lot of these different things that change over time. As such, much, you know, both volunteer wise and professionally, I'm pretty involved in a lot of different organizations. One thing I will kind of coach families on is if you are looking for someone in financial services to help you, if for whatever reason you don't want to talk with us, that's totally fine. But look for the Chartered Special Needs Consultant designation. That's the CHSNC. That's the designation behind, you know, the letters behind someone's name. Look for that because that is an American college credential that specifically trains financial advisors to do special needs planning. So if you don't see that, it may be, you know, a reason to look for a specialist to join your team and help you with this type of planning. I also am involved with the Academy of Special Needs Planners, which is full of attorneys, trustees, other financial advisors across the country. And then I sit on the Kansas Council for Developmental Disabilities. We actually have a council meeting here soon. And that to me is important because it's talking about a lot of the state and federal benefits that our kids receive and being able to voice advocacy work and opinions there at the legislative level. So very proud of all that work. And obviously I volunteer quite a bit at Children's Mercy as well, just to stay close to some of the things and changes and how to better care for our kids. Okay. How do we do this? Well, our mission is first and foremost education, because as a parent, that's what I was missing, or I felt like I was missing when I started asking our advisor at the time that Hudson was born, hey, how do we do this? How do we pull this together? And I didn't get a very clear answer, right? And so I went looking for someone who could help us, and I learned really quickly that both in financial services and a lot of other sort of places for information, whether that's school, the medical piece, you know, social communities type organizations, all this information is sort of spread out and scattered. And so pulling it all together as a caregiver or a family member is really challenging. And so I created these workshops to try and help families become more educated without all of that stress and having to look everywhere for everything. So we do a lot of work in terms of guiding you as a caregiver. We also work with key family members to sometimes facilitate emotional conversations around some of this planning, which almost always comes up. So we approach this work with a lot of grace, right? We have to give ourselves grace as parents. Sometimes we're hard on ourselves. Obviously, integrity and compassion are big values of mine as well. And our goal is really to create financial independence for everybody in the family, not just for your child, but for you too. One thing I will mention, and I think, Marianne, you have a copy of this. I wrote a book, and the book is about Hudson's journey. It's not a financial planning book. It is just from diagnosis to the care at Children's Mercy to how we sort of transitioned into an attitude of gratitude, if you will, over time as we started processing the grief around our daughter's diagnosis. And, you know, I'm pretty proud of it. It's on Amazon, or you can, you know, check out this QR code and click it there. If you have Kindle Unlimited, I think it's free. So you can check that out if you feel inclined. Okay, so I'm curious. I'm going to prompt you guys a little bit here. My guess is that most of you are here because, or you click this link because you have someone you're caring for, or you know someone either with autism or who has a disability, and you're curious about their future. So I'm curious, what is the thing that keeps you up at night? What do you worry about most in terms of this topic? Okay, what financial concerns are keeping you up? What future planning just feels overwhelming and really unattainable to fix? All right, or to address. I shouldn't say fix. I don't know that we fix anything. We just put things in place to allow ourselves a new normal that's good, right? So I'm going to share, while you guys type that in, I'm going to share what we hear on a weekly basis. So one of the things we hear is, and this is probably the most common, we don't know where to start. This is just incredibly overwhelming. Thinking about who our replacement team will be for our child, and where to go and how to put this together. It's just a lot. And so sometimes people or families will not address a lot of these concerns because of this particular reason. If that's you, you're in very a populated company, right? A populated group. There's a lot of us that feel that way. We have a lot in place already, but then my follow-up question sometimes is, okay, you have a special needs trust. How is it funded? Do you know when it's funded? Do you know what is going into it in order to provide that financial support for your child when you aren't here anymore? And oftentimes the answer is no, we don't really have a funding plan. So step one is creating the document. Step two is figuring out how it actually lives and breathes and works once it's in existence. All right, so that's something that we talk about in terms of the life plan. And then sometimes we'll hear we have it all taken care of, we're good. And, you know, that was something, I think, Marianne, when you and I met, that was something that came up. And then after we started talking more, it was like, oh, wait, maybe there is a little bit more to do or a little bit more to learn. And, you know, I think this is really normal if you've been on the journey a really long time. But I'd also encourage you, if this is you, to just go back and double check, right? Go back and double check that all of your T's are crossed and your I's are dotted. Sometimes I also hear, you know, if a family has a lot of assets or a lot of money, wealthy families don't need this planning. This often will come from case managers, sometimes social workers, and really my question in response to this statement is, usually the more assets you have, the more planning that needs to be done and the more double checking we have to do, right? Because there's so many moving parts and there's so much that can not go right if we don't make sure that everything is in order. So I actually, I disagree. I think every single family, no matter your level of wealth, even if you are someone who's middle income, you know, even not, right, that you doing this planning is going to make you feel better. It's going to give you peace of mind to know that there's a plan in place if and when something should happen to you. So my goal is to provide you with information. Okay, I want to give you some practical steps that you can take to ease your mind. And I really hope for some confidence that the people and the kiddos that you're caring for will be taken care of while you're here during your lifetime and after you're gone. So as we go through these steps, I want you to keep a few things in mind. Number one, it's never too soon to start planning. And the sooner you start, I promise, the better you're going to feel. I hear that so much, you guys. As soon as someone says, okay, I'm going to do one thing and then the next thing, we take baby steps, it really starts to dissipate that stress and that anxiety around the future. You do not have to do all of this at once. Planning is very much a process and you can manage this over time. So we'll often help families to, you know, start planning for the things you know for sure right now today. And then as time goes on and you learn more, or as things change with your child and or their situation, you revise things, you revise your plan. And if you are feeling overwhelmed, that's totally fine. It's okay. And it's very normal. But you can do this one step at a time. Just like when you received the first diagnosis and you got connected with services and resources, you know, it's just one day at a time until you get your new normal, right? And we all figure that out over time. And last but not least, you're not alone. There are a lot of people and resources to support you in this journey and how to put things in place that make you feel good and confident as a family. So today's agenda, here's what we're going to cover. We're going to talk about building your team. We're going to talk about who you need on your team and the role each person plays. Number two, we are going to begin talking about your unique situation and what you want to do for your future and how that impacts planning, government benefits, and the future cost of your child's care. We are going to go over a little bit about special needs trusts and how they can be a really great tool in planning. And then finally, we'll also talk about ABLE accounts, which I think are becoming more and more talked about, and we get a lot of questions about these. But how do these work, and do we need one or the other, especially special needs trust, or talk about that. And just for your guys' information as well, I also do monthly workshops on these last two that are a little bit more detailed information than what we'll share in this particular workshop. So check back with me. I've got some resources at the end that I'll want to send you, and we can get those to you, okay? So number one, most important thing when you do life care planning for a child with a disability of any diagnosis, autism or anything else, we never want to leave more than $2,000 in that child's name, even if it's in a jointly held account. And the reason for that is because in order for your child to qualify for certain federal, state, and local benefits, things like Medicaid, Social Security, or others, in Missouri, we have some very unique programs for kids on the spectrum. Asset and income tests can apply. And so anything over $2,000, a house, and one vehicle will count against them. In other words, they won't qualify for these benefits. And so it's really, really important that when you're planning for a child who will be a long-term dependent, that we have a team, okay, helping you navigate all these different nuances and all these different things. It's because this type of planning can be very complex, and in my opinion, it's really impossible for one person to be an expert on everything. And so we approach this, and why we're different in terms of how we help families is we look at essentially 3 different categories, and I added a 4th because, well, it's a flower. We needed 4 sides to the flower. So first and foremost, financial professional, maybe myself, maybe not, but someone that really understands not just insurance, not just investments, but the entire picture of your financial life. Okay, so this is someone who's really truly going to walk you through a full holistic financial plan. They're going to look at your life insurance, your long-term disability insurance, a long-term care plan. They're going to talk to you about savings, debt, cash flow, yes, investments in retirement, of course, but also ABLE accounts. And they most likely will also be asking questions or talking to you about how much should go into the special needs trust and when. So in other words, they may have to help work with one of these other professionals, the attorney, to help you walk through some of those choices and decisions, okay? The next person, or sometimes a group of people, but usually we label this as a government benefit specialist. All right, so this is someone who's going to help you identify and maximize all of the state, local, and federal programs that your child is eligible for at sometimes different ages. This could include SSI, supplemental security income, Social Security disability income. Yes, those are 2 totally different programs. Definitely Social Security retirement if that applies to you. Medicaid, and then any other state or local programs. And then the third person or professional would be an attorney. Okay, so ideally we want someone who is very experienced in special needs planning. So this is not every attorney in the area, but we want them to help us create documents that will protect yourself and your child in the future in a lot of different ways. So number one, a will, power of attorney, power of healthcare. They may also coach you on creating a letter of intent, which is something we'll talk about. Technically, the letter of intent is not a legal document, but it is something that I think is super important and should be with your legal documents. Decisions on guardianship. If you have a child approaching the age of 18, this is a big decision and it's a big discussion. What kind of guardianship? Do we want full guardianship? Should we have conservatorship? Should we do supported decision making? What are our choices and how do we approach that? The attorney is going to help you walk through all those different options. And then, of course, creating and writing a special needs trust. Okay, Marianne, I'm going to pause. Any questions so far? And I can't hear you.
Yeah. So there are a few. Someone was asking about the different levels, and so I just put in the chat that level 1 is the higher functioning type of kiddo that quote unquote requires support. Level 2 requires substantial support. Level 3 requiring very substantial support. So that's since the DSM-5 came out. They give that with a diagnosis. So
Yeah, and Dominic would have been considered Asperger's. That was the classic diagnosis for him.
Right.
I don't say that now just because they switched everything, but yeah, that's the same.
Right. So, and then there's just the answers that they gave to your
perfect.
To your thing. So I'm happy to read those off too, but pretty much everything that you've talked about already. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Very good. All right. And then I added a fourth category in terms of your team, just simply because we all have these people in our lives as professionals, right? Doctors, teachers, therapists. Sometimes we're also going to different things in the community, like the Kaufman for the sensory friendly ballet, right? A public program. And then sometimes even private programs, and churches in the area can be extremely helpful and have different programs, and they can also be a resource for us to build our village of support for our children. All right, so these are all really, really important. And when I first started asking these questions as a mom, my thing was, why can't they all talk, right? Why can't they all sort of be part of this fluent team that talks to one another? Well, that's sort of why I went into practice, is because I wanted to create a team for a family, or at least have the family choose, have you choose who are these people on your team. You pick them, right? You get these different choices and you pick them. But we want them to create this whole story for your family now, and then also when transition of care and your replacement team comes into place, okay? Okay, so once you have your team assembled, it's time to start developing your life plan, okay? And the first step to understand your current situation and what your goals are, and it's really something that we as a financial planning group help families with. It's something that we spend a lot of time talking about, because everybody's situation is unique. You may have a similar diagnosis, for example, autism, but every kiddo on the spectrum is slightly different, right? Every situation and level of support is different. And so to really understand where you are and what your goals are, we ask you about your family. We ask about your job, how you're doing with spending and saving, what you want out of life right now, maybe in a few years or maybe 10 years from now. What are you dreaming about for the future? I think as special needs parents, that's sometimes a hard question, because I don't know, we might after a diagnosis say, can I dream about the future? The answer is yes. It just may look different. What are you worried about financially, right? You guys have been answering that question. So these are all things we spend some time talking about, because it gives us a good idea of where you want to go and where you are right now. And then once we have that basic understanding, much like when you go to a doctor for the first time, you get a little bit of a history, then we want to know about your child. Okay, what is important when you think about their best life in the future? What do you envision? What do you want them to have? Where will they live? Who will be providing their daily care? Who's your replacement team? That's also a scary question, but it's an important one, because if you don't design it and you don't pick those people or those entities now while you're alive and healthy, then someone else out of your complete control will be doing it after you're gone. So I don't know about you, but I like having some control. I like knowing what the actual plan is if, God forbid, something were to happen to Dan and I. And so we talk about this. Who's the replacement team? Where will your child live? It's a lot to think about, but it's really the foundation for what type of plan you are going to create for your child's future. Okay, so it's the starting point for us to figure out how we can get you from where you are to that future goal. And these team members, right, they're going to help support you throughout each phase of this planning. So once we understand where you are, where you want to go, then we get to talk to the government benefits specialist, right? We get to figure out, what exactly does your child qualify for? Are we maximizing each of these benefits? And what you're seeing here on the screen are all federal level benefits, some of which are executed at the state level, okay? But Social Security is probably the biggest one we get the most questions about. And I think that's because there's 3 different accounts with Social Security. So there's SSI, Supplemental Security Income, there's retirement Social Security, and then there's also Social Security disability income. And all 3 are very different in terms of how you apply and how you qualify. qualify. So what about that? When does that apply? How do we maximize it? How is it affected in terms of how you do the financial planning? Certainly, Medicaid is a really big resource. A lot of us have kids on waivers and Medicaid waivers, and those are what we call home and community-based supports. Those are really important as our kids get older. Some of our kids, like especially in Kansas, you know, we may be on a wait list for a waiver, and that's hard, right? That's also why I sit on the DD Council. I'm trying to reduce that wait list for Kansas families. But in all, how does Medicaid apply and when? And are we making sure that we're taking advantage and maximizing all the resources available on that waiver? Certainly vocational services, so that would be employment supports. And then we all have been to IEP meetings, right? So public school services, therapy, tutoring, specialized supports, those can be included. And then if you have military service in your family, your child actually could be eligible for financial assistance, sometimes even medical coverage or other services through the VA. The VA can be actually really helpful. The problem with the VA is you have to know who to ask and where to go. They don't like advertise that for us. So these are all just some high level examples. And I would say these are some of the more well-known benefits, but there are lots of others. Okay, all offering different types of aid with varying eligibility requirements. And it's a lot of information to sort through. So we talked about, again, how your team should include a government benefit specialist, and this is where that person comes in. It's really their job to make sure that you have access to it, you know where to go, and you know how to maximize each of these areas for your child. Okay. Like I said, Social Security is probably the most popular, but how likely is it that your child will qualify? So I want to take a look at a couple examples of how this works. And remember, Social Security has 3 different types of programs, all with different qualifications. So I'm going to talk about the most common and probably the biggest areas for our kids. So the first one is Supplemental Security Income. SSI is often what it's called. And the way in which you qualify for SSI is if you have a child under the age of 18, the parent's income or guardian's income and assets and household size are used to determine that child's eligibility for SSI. However, once your child turns 18, that changes. Since now they're considered a legal adult, the federal government looks at their assets and income instead of the parents or the guardians. So if your child has less than $900 a month in income and less than that $2,000 of assets that we talked about earlier, he or she could be eligible for benefits starting at age 18. In 2023, the maximum amount is $914 a month. 2024 numbers are already out. They've already announced them. It will be $943 next year. So for those of you already receiving SSI for your adult children, Marianne, if you know you're getting this, you're getting a raise in 2024. It's going up again, which I was thankful to see. Now, here's where it gets a little more fun. Once both parents, or if you're a single parent, once you retire and you start taking Social Security retirement, your child could also be eligible for what I call a Social Security bump up or a disabled child benefit. All right, this applies if your child was considered diagnosed or disabled before age 22. The disabled child benefit can be up to 50% of the parent's benefit and depending on the parent's work history. So when you elect Social Security retirement for yourself is a really big deal for your child. If you elect early, they get less. If you elect at full retirement age, they get the maximum. If you elect at the latest age, which right now is 70, they still get the maximum from your full retirement age. So it doesn't go up again for them, okay? Once you elect this disabled child benefit, it is a permanent benefit for your child. It lasts with them for the rest of their life. So it's a very important election. And I've come across CFPs and other advisors in the community that do not advise properly on this because they don't understand it. So again, working with a financial professional that understands special needs planning and disability planning is really, really important. And it helps you to stay on top of things of, hey, when should I take Social Security retirement? Doesn't mean you retire at that age, but it may mean that you delay taking it if you retire early. When you're planning for kids like ours, it's really important to try and estimate the cost of care for their future. So this slide, I think, is the biggest differentiator and the most challenging thing that most families face, but not a lot of financial advisors or planners address. And this is my point of frustration. Okay, this is why I created these workshops, because I really wanted families to understand what this means. So it is probably impossible for you to know every bit of medical care or support that your child is going to need for the rest of their life. However, there are things you can estimate and things that you should take into consideration that you may not be thinking about yet. For example, right now, you're probably providing a lot of that care coordination or even direct care for your child yourself for free, right? Like Hudson goes to swim therapy at the Jewish Community Center over in Overland Park every Wednesday morning. She misses school on Wednesday mornings because she goes to swim therapy there, and she loves it. They get her in the hot tub after the swim session is over. It's like the highlight of her week, and she's always in a good mood afterwards. And I'm sure getting relaxed after having all that muscle tension is just awesome, right? But we have to take her there. Dan takes her there in a wheelchair accessible van that is ours. And so if we weren't here to do that, I would still want her to have that therapy. And so that's something that we have to build into her plan. How much does it cost to pay someone to take her to and from that therapy because her waiver doesn't pay for transportation? Who are we paying to take her to and from that appointment? I don't expect them to do it for free. It's not this isn't their child, right? And so, of course, if Hudson outlives us, and these services or whatever it is your child is receiving most likely will not be free. Someone else is going to have to provide them. And so I know the choices of this and talking about like who's going to be here last or first, I don't like it, right? Option A is I outlive Hudson. I did all this planning and, you know, she passes away before us. And by the way, I'm really close to that because we were told that when she was born. So we've always thought, well, what if, right? What if she does pass away before us? But in my opinion, the other option is we die before her. And Children's Mercy has been amazing because they've allowed her to survive and to thrive and to have this really good quality of life up to this point. But we don't know. We aren't promised tomorrow. So, you know, what is the plan either way? And so I just encourage you, when you start working with this team that you're going to build, we've got to build in this quality of life plan, meaning where you live, okay, right? Because I work with families all over the country. In California, the cost of living is very different than here in Kansas City. Where you live is important. So if you're a family that is maybe moving, you're a military family, or you move for a job and you're leaving the Kansas, Missouri area and moving to another state, that's a big deal because your benefits are changing and the cost of living is changing, right? What is the care you're providing? So figuring out day to day, what exactly do we do? And then what are the benefits going to cover in terms of that care when you're not here anymore? And then we get to this annual number. We get to a number in the future. And essentially this is your child's long-term annual number. So once you have it figured out, your financial planner will be the one then that puts that into a projected plan for your child. And this is where we begin to figure out exactly how much needs to go into the special needs trust now or at your death. So really, really important calculation. I see so many families that just guess, or financial advisors that say, yeah, you know, $200,000 in a trust is great. I think that'll be plenty. Well, how do you know if you don't do this, right? As an industry, we spend so much time planning our retirement future, and yet we're guessing for our child's long-term future. Let's not do that anymore. Let's get very specific and at least start to build a quality of life plan for them. Okay, so I'm sure many of you have heard of special needs trusts. I'm going to be referring to this topic as a third-party special needs trust. Okay, so there are a lot of different types of special needs trusts. There's a first-party special needs trust. There's a pooled special needs trust. But for the most part, the majority of families have what are called third-party special needs trusts or supplemental special needs trusts. So for those of you who aren't familiar with these, A special needs trust can be set up for your loved one to help provide funding options to supplement the government benefits. So the benefits we talked about earlier, Social Security, Medicaid, those are going to cover the bare necessities for your child, things like food, rent, utilities, place to live. You know, a special needs trust is used to pay for things that the government benefits don't provide, but that can help build a better life. Things like rehabilitation, supplemental medical care, computers, entertainment, out-of-pocket therapy or private therapy, travel, meeting and seeing other family members when you're gone, right? One of the things we have in our quality of life plan for Hudson is that I still want her and her brother to spend time together on holidays if that's possible. I want her to have a relationship with friends in the community. And so those things may not be covered by government benefits. So building that into her plan is important. If someone leaves money to your child and that money goes directly to them as an individual, the government will consider that money as income or assets and therefore potentially disqualify them from getting some of the benefits they've been relying on. Now, Medicaid, after your child ages off primary insurance, is usually their only form of health insurance until they potentially qualify for Medicare, but that can be a long time. So losing Medicaid means sometimes losing their health insurance, which is a big deal. So even if the intention of the family member was to help because they wanted to leave money or a little bit of an inheritance to your child, giving that money is probably a bad thing if it's not done in a special needs trust and or an ABLE account. So this is something we talk to extended family members about a lot. We want them to leave it to the special needs trust, whatever it is, not to the person with a disability directly. Okay, makes sense. So these are legal documents. They're very, very important. You work with an attorney who's licensed in your state to draft this with you. One of the things I do talk about in terms of a trustee, so a trustee is the person who essentially controls the assets and money inside of the special needs trust. A lot of families will think about having a family member or a friend be the trustee, but I want you to really consider maybe having someone like a corporate trustee or a professional trustee. Not to replace the family member. The family member could still be what we call a co-trustee or the caregiver. But the person who essentially is in control of the money takes on a lot of liability and a lot of responsibility in terms of distributing those funds outside the trust. And the reason for that is because Medicaid and Social Security know about these trusts. Why? Because when you create them, they are filed with the county in which you receive services. So they review them. And once they become active, Medicaid and Social Security have the right to come back and ask a trustee about distributions from the trust if they feel inclined. And yes, that happens, and it happens a lot. And so you have to have someone who's really knowledgeable about answering those questions. Otherwise, or at least even administering the trust, otherwise you still run the risk of your child losing benefits if they don't do it properly. I'll give you a really easy example. I have a set of brothers I work with who the oldest brother is the caregiver for the younger brother with Down syndrome. Okay, they both work, they both are employed. Older brother drives younger brother to his job every day. Older brother's truck broke down and he needed a new truck. And he wasn't exactly great at saving on his own, and he didn't have the money to go and buy a new truck for himself. He wasn't planning on that. So he decides to take money out of his brother's special needs trust and purchase the truck, justifying it with saying, I take him to and from work every day. This is part of my caregiving responsibility. Social Security came knocking and said, hey, curious, is that truck titled in the trust name? Is the insurance in the trust being paid for from the trust? Is this all in the trust? And he's like, no, it's my truck. I'm just providing the service. Social Security said, yeah, sorry, that is not a qualified distribution. So we're going to pause SSI benefits, and we might want to also let Medicaid know that this is an asset now. And so we need to, that's a problem. You either need to put the money back in or show us how you're going to create a plan to put the money back in over time and then reapply for benefits. So really innocent, right, distribution. He was doing the right thing in his mind, but because of his lack of knowledge in administering a special needs trust and how that would affect benefits, it caused a lot of problems, and it was an expensive fix. So having a professional trustee, somebody who is a trust company, sometimes could be an attorney, just depends, right? And I have a lot of trust companies that I can send to you guys if you're curious about this, but they need to be experienced in special needs trust administration. And yes, they do cost money versus a family member, but I'm telling you, the mistakes that are made by family members more often than not are way more expensive than just having a professional trustee. It doesn't mean the professional trustee is the only one who's at the table in terms of money decisions. You can have a co-trustee relationship, which is how I've set up mine, or for Hudson. We have a professional trustee at the table to take off all the workload from the family member, but family member gets to say yay or nay if that trustee is doing the right thing over time. So it's possible to have a symbiotic relationship there, but having that check and balance, in my opinion, is really important. Okay. Third, when you are thinking about how to fund a special needs trust, a really popular way to do that, and sometimes, not always, but sometimes that's more affordable, is just using some life insurance. You pay a lower premium rather than having to physically save all the money yourself. And then at your death, that money goes into the trust tax-free. You know, right now, as Dan and I are saving for our own retirement, we carry a lot of life insurance because if something happens to me right now, he needs financial support because I'm the one who works, right? And he's definitely going to have health insurance somewhere. So he's going to need money for that. However, if he passes away before me, I need a caregiver. I need someone to do the care so I can keep running the business. So it is a dual thing in terms of as you're building, you may want to carry more life insurance than say when you're a little bit older and you're approaching retirement, you may not need as much. Finally, the trust can be set up so that if your loved one with autism or a disability passes away before the funds in the trust are used, the money is not lost. It just would go to a beneficiary that you would name, whether that's another family member, maybe a charity, maybe back to Children's Mercy. I mean, it's whoever you want to name as the secondary beneficiary. One of the things we'll send you as a handout is what's called a letter of intent. This to me is the most simple, easiest way you guys can take one step forward in doing planning for your child that is hugely impactful. So letter of intent, like I mentioned earlier, is not a legal document, but it is what I call your brain trust. It's your last set of instructions for how to take care of your child with a disability. So for me, I use this as Hudson's master document. It's got all her doctors and phone numbers. It's got all her medications. It has her therapy. It's got her schedule, right? From the time she wakes up until she goes to bed at night. What is she doing on which day? It talks also about things that she's interested in, how to motivate her during therapy. It talks about things to not do. Like one of the things that's most people wouldn't know is she loves fireworks. So that contrast for her cortical visual impairment is so cool. She loves watching like bright lights on a dark sky. However, the noise and the sensory input of a fireworks display is just too much. It causes seizures for her. And I'm sure like many of your kids, the sensory overload is not good. So we will put in here, you know, special instructions about that. Either put her in front of a TV where there's not the noise, or take headphones, right? Let's put those on as you go to watch the fireworks outside on 4th of July. But that's something that nobody would know unless we put it down. So you have things about like that about your child, right? There are little things that only you know because you're your mom or your dad or your guardian. So this is the place where that can live, and it's an electronic document, so you can easily update it year to year. And I actually use it anytime Dan and I go out on a date night. This is what we give to people. Here, read her instruction manual. When I went out with my mom on a vacation a couple weeks ago, and we were out of the country, I updated this and gave it to everybody. When she gets a new doctor, and by the way, this is kind of a shortcut, but when she gets a new physician or a new therapist, I email them this either in the portal or over email. And I say, here, read this first, and then come back to me and see if you have any questions. It's just my way of sort of making my time more efficient, right? I don't want to update you on her entire history. Read this first, and then if you have questions, we'll talk. I use this in her IEP meetings. I use this when we're going to a new therapy place and they don't know her yet, right? So it's a really good document to just continuously update. It's totally free, you guys. It's super easy to do. You may have also heard about something called a 529A or an ABLE account, which stands for Achieving a Better Life Experience. ABLE accounts are tax-free accounts for people who are diagnosed with a long-term disability before their 26th birthday. Now, caveat, if you're listening to this after the year 2026, that is going to change, okay? They're going to move the age from 26 to 46, starting in 2026, lots of sixes. But again, the information I'm sharing with you will change in the future. So if you're listening to this recording at a future date, just know these are probably going to be outdated numbers. Anyway, they can be set up at any time. They can be very, very helpful. And that's because while a lot of people with a disability depend on the public benefits we talked about earlier for basic needs, ABLE accounts do not affect Medicaid eligibility. And as long as the account balance is under $100,000 total, it won't affect SSI. If it goes over $100,000, it will. Contributions to the account are post-tax, meaning you don't get a tax deduction for putting money into these things. However, you can get a state income tax deduction depending on the state you live in and which ABLE account you use. So for example, we have a Kansas ABLE account for Hudson. We get a state income tax deduction for putting money in there, and so does anyone else who lives in Kansas. So that's very helpful. Missouri has also a state income tax deduction for putting money into an ABLE account, and anybody else who lives in Missouri that wants to contribute will also get that same state income tax deduction. Right now, in 2023, you can put in up to $17,000 total per calendar year. That's the limit. And it has to be cash, right? The only thing we can transfer into these is a 529C or a college savings account, but pretty much anything else. Like if you wanted to transfer a retirement account into this, you couldn't do it. You cannot transfer a non-qualified investment account into this. It has to be cash and or a college 529 plan, okay? Assets inside grow tax-free and they come out tax-free as long as you use them for the benefit of your child. Your child is allowed to have one ABLE account. That's it. So what do we use them for? Well, unlike a special needs trust that cannot pay for housing, utilities, and food, let me rephrase that and repeat that. A special needs trust cannot pay for housing, utilities, and food because if your child's receiving SSI, that's already being paid for by a government benefit. We can't supplant government benefits in a special needs trust. That's the whole point of them. An ABLE account, however, can. So it's a lot more flexible in terms of what we can use the money for in an ABLE account. We can still use it for education. So even if you transfer a college savings account into an ABLE, you're not losing the ability to pay for education or tutoring or private therapy, for example. You can pay for housing, transportation, employment training, basically anything that improves the quality of life and independence of the child and or adult with a disability. Maybe some nuanced examples. Hudson had she needed a bathroom remodel in our house just to physically accommodate her as she's gotten older. And so her waiver, we had already exhausted in terms of home modification. And so we used her ABLE account to pay for some of those expenses. I had an adult I work with who lives in New Jersey, and he and his family go to Disney every year for a vacation. He calls me, he says, Casey, can I use my ABLE account to pay for my plane ticket? I said, absolutely. Go on vacation, have fun. So that's a qualified expense. Anything that is essentially legal in their best benefit, right? Those are gonna be things the ABLE account can pay for. The easier way to probably tell you things that they can't pay for, alcohol, tobacco products. We can't use the debit card to go to an ATM machine and get cash out. That's to prevent financial theft from a non-family caregiver. No adult entertainment, however you want to define that, and no gambling, right? Those are kind of the 5 that are no-nos, but everything else is pretty much allowable, okay? Every state, like I mentioned, has different rules around ABLE plans. And so, you know, if you feel like this would be helpful to you, this resource here on the screen, ablenrc.org, the website, is a great one to go to learn more about your state-specific ABLE account. So ablenrc.org is ablenationalresourcecenter.org. ABLE National Resource Center is run by the National Disability Institute out of DC. They're federally funded to help educate families and other people about ABLE accounts. And so I love this website. I actually go to it every single day professionally because I work with families in all different states. So if this is helpful to you, check it out. They also do their own workshops and webinars on ABLE plans, and so it might be helpful for you to check that out too. So we've talked a lot about planning specifically for your child. And I know that when you have someone like my daughter, your son in your life, it's really natural to put them first, especially with something like this, a topic like this. And after all, you're the person that's caring for them, right? And financial planning is something that most of the time they cannot do for themselves. They're going to need some support with that. However, I get this, sometimes this comes up. If you are not financially secure, you don't have a financial plan, it's most likely they won't be either. So making sure that you have a plan for yourself is actually going to improve their quality of life and their financial planning long term. So make sure you're thinking about things like what you want your retirement to look like. Do you want to help pay for their education or any other child's education that you're supporting? Would you like to buy a house? The housing market has been very strange the last few years, so that becomes a big topic. Or maybe you're considering a business opportunity. Whatever it is you're dreaming about, there needs to be a plan around it financially that includes all of it, not just the future planning for your child. So they go together. Planning for your child in a vacuum does not work. They are dependent on you, and so making sure that you are secure is really, really important. So the best way to do that, we believe, is, again, going back to your team, selecting a financial professional that can help you look at the big picture and identify your goals. And you're probably not going to put a plan in place all at once. It's just not realistic in most situations. And so the next step that we take with our families is just prioritizing. You know, we figure out what are the most important things to you personally so that we can determine the best ways to get you there using a customized plan that works for you and your family and your unique situation. And finally, you know, life has a way of changing. We've lived through a pandemic. We've had all kinds of crazy stuff go on. We're in the midst of a new election year. There's all kinds of things that are going to change. And so the best way to keep your plan on track and make sure it still fits the life you want is to review it regularly. Most of the families I work with, we're doing at least annual reviews, if not more frequently than that. If we're in that phase of adult transition where you've got a 16, 17, 18-year-old that's getting ready to, you know, go into that last phase of school and their adult program, very, very important time, especially in terms of benefits elections and, you know, the quality of life planning and all of that. We spend a lot more time with families, you know, kind of coaching them through what that looks like. So a few things to consider when you're thinking about selecting a financial professional. And you guys, I always say this because you don't have to work with me. I mean, I'd be honored if that was what you wanted. But again, I do this for educational purposes primarily because I couldn't find this when I was a brand new parent. So obviously work with somebody you trust, build a relationship, interview people, ask them questions. I think it's really normal for you to be developing a close relationship with someone who's managing your money and helping you with your money. I feel very passionate and strongly about working with someone who's extremely experienced in special needs planning. So look for that designation, CHSNC, Chartered Special Needs Consultant. That's really important. And then make sure that your financial person is also working with you over time as your needs change. This is generational planning, okay? It is not going to stay static. Hudson's needs as a 13-year-old are definitely not going to be her needs when she's 25. So that plan has to adjust and grow and change with her. So work with someone who understands that. And then I also am a big believer in succession planning. So making sure you're working with someone who has a backup plan for their business and themselves. A company with a strong history and maintains financial strength ratings, right? We've seen, some of us have seen fallings or failings in the financial services industry. So just making sure you're working with a good, strong company. I know we've covered a lot this evening and we're a little bit over time. And so I just want to reiterate what we've talked about really quickly in summary. And then I want to give you guys a QR code so that you can get some of these resources. First, you need a team, financial professional, government benefit specialist, and an attorney, and you're going to be the one that selects those people. Okay, so if you need options for those folks, let us know. We will give you lists of people that are really good in the community. These are going to be people who then work with you to create the special needs plan, right? Understand your situation, figure out where you want to go, make sure you're getting all the benefits, estimate that future cost of care, establish and fund a special needs trust and an ABLE account, and finally, don't forget to plan for yourself. Okay, thank you so much for allowing me to be here and talk with you about this topic. I hope this was valuable. If you would like to get the handouts or even just schedule some one-on-one time, I do free consults all the time. Happy to answer any questions. I'm an open book too about what we've done personally for our family. Select this QR code. It'll send you to a Google form that will then allow us to shoot you an email, and we'll get that either scheduled or email you the handouts. No pressure at all. I don't believe in that. So like I said, I'm happy to provide more information if anybody needs it. That's all I got, Marianne. Do we have any questions or anything else I can help with?
Yes, we do. We do have a few questions. And one really good one, I mean, many that are good comments, but this particular person said, we have 2 children. Our oldest, 6 years old, has a critical disability called NALD and cannot walk, talk, is G-tube fed, and is deaf and blind. I also have a 2-year-old with autism, level 2, and ADHD. My question is, how do you handle and get your future set up when you are on a single based income of a family of 4? Can we still set up for a financial future even with the little income we have?
That's a great question. And I think, I work with a lot of single parents and sometimes even blended families or divorced families, which does cause more financial pressure, I would say. And I think the answer is yes, right? I think doing nothing is worse than doing something. So things like maximizing benefits, knowing exactly when those benefits happen, where to go and who to talk to so that you're not losing time in terms of those benefits is really, really important, especially when you're on a single income for a larger family. In addition to that, that letter of intent that we talked about tonight, what if something happens to you tomorrow, right? Where are my instructions for your kids? Where do I find that? That's free to do. And that will at least reduce and kind of ease someone else into caregiving for them should, God forbid, something happen to you now. So is there maybe elaborate planning that can be done? It depends. It depends on how good of a saver you can be. But I understand that. I mean, I started a business 10 years ago. We were definitely shoestringing it at the time. So I get that at a very personal level. And I think still having that team in place to help you is really important, no matter your level of income or assets, really, truly.
Yeah. It's really good information. And then I did get this question of how expensive is this type of service that you provide? How do you break that down?
Well, it depends, I guess. It depends on the amount of time we would be spending together. I'm a financial planner that can do what's called a fee only type of an arrangement, which means I don't necessarily have to manage your investments or sell you products or anything like that. But if you are a family that does need maybe more life insurance or needs help with your investments because you just haven't had that figured out yet, I can do that too. So there are lots of different ways that we can be compensated for the time. But I really want to stress that if you do have questions and you just want to talk with somebody, please reach out. I'm not going to charge you for our meeting time initially, and we'll go over all of those things if it makes sense. But I've not yet met a family that left a meeting with me and said that was a waste of time or that quote unquote wasn't worth our investment in the information. So reach out. Don't let the cost or that price tag, whatever it may be, scare you, because I promise you we're very, very accessible to all levels of families.
That's excellent. Yeah, I think that's it. With questions right now, but I think you have to marinate on a lot of this stuff, when it's a lot of, excellent new information.
Well, I was going to ask you, Marianne, because you've done some stuff for your family. What were some of your, I guess, takeaways, or was there anything that popped out at you that made you say, hey, that was really good?
Yeah, well, interestingly enough, and it's probably the age I'm at, but the idea that we've been talking about when we're going to retire, and the thing that you said about you know uh,
Social Security
funding.
election.
Yeah. The Social Security election, and taking early rather than later, and the longer you can put it off, and just that even existed, that there was a potential benefit for them too. I've never heard that before, and that's
and
really,
by the way, Social Security won't tell you either.
Sure they won't.
Even if you go to elect your retirement benefit, they don't ask you, oh, do you have a long-term dependent with a disability? They don't do that.
Right.
And they don't advertise it. It's not as, it sometimes just feels like it's hidden information, even though it's not. It's just, there's so much to their program. And by the way, Social Security is a federal agency right now, is 23% staffed. So it is a big challenge to deal with them as a federal agency if you don't know where you're going or what you're doing.
Right.
So again, having that team, right? Having the team in place to help you navigate some of that stuff just makes your time more efficient, and you get your child the benefits they need sooner rather than later.
I think the document that you talked about, Casey, of how does this person, how would somebody else take care of your child, all those specifics that do change from year to year. It's fabulous to have something electronically that you can update, and like you said, it's a shortcut that you can use for a lot of different meetings you potentially go into, especially around the time of transition or life changes, like going into a different housing situation or whatever, especially if for somebody like me, and Hudson now has some words, but if you have a child like I do that has 0 words, unable to speak at all, it's all the more important, because you think about all the love and care you've put into them. You want to articulate how that looks exactly.
100%.
And
100%.
So that's
and again, right, the control of that while you're alive and well is so important. And so again, just if the only thing you do after this workshop is complete your letter of intent, and again, we'll send you that form. It's a really cool PDF, and it's super easy to email. If that's the only thing you do, that's a huge step forward in helping to kind of create that transition and that vision of what you're wanting for their future.
Yeah, there's so much good information, Casey, so much good information. We will be archiving this that we did this evening, so give us several weeks, and then we will put it on our recorded trainings, and so that you can access it and share it with others. But this is really a person that not only knows, but knows from a day-to-day thing of what it takes to raise the children that we're raising, and that's really, really helpful, I think, and just all the right intentions. So I really appreciate it, you giving us your time tonight, Casey.
Thank you so much for having me, and again, happy to be a resource to you and others in the future if it's needed and valuable.
Great. That's okay. There, my camera came back on. It's been off different times tonight. It just decided that it didn't want to always be on. I don't blame it. So, and I always like to thank my friend Will, who helps with our IT stuff, who is just a critical part of our team. We really like you to fill out a survey. It takes you less than 2 minutes, and we love to hear about what else you want to hear about. And so please let us know what that is. And again, Casey Seitz, thank you so much for your input tonight. We're really grateful, really grateful. So families, access everything you can. The one thing I will say in closing is that our families, unfortunately, aren't exempt from all other kinds of life events. And so, if you've lived long enough, like I have, you've had unemployment, you've had cancer, it's like if we could just be exempt of all that stuff, that would seem fair to me,
Yeah.
but it's just not the reality. And so the reality is we really, actually more than the average person, in my opinion, we need to plan because of our children. So use this as a starting point, and you will sleep better at night, knowing that you've made some plans and are going forward, in the right direction with the right guidance. So with that, I will leave you all. And so thank you. Happy holidays to everybody. We'll see you in January. I think our training is going to be on safety in January. So tune back in, but sign up for that newsletter and tell us what else you'd like to hear about. So thank you all so much. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.